Hi, everybody. You're listening to Comics and History, episode number 123, part 2, Spotlight on the Spectre. During the Copper Age, the Doug Moench run continued. Having a little bit of trouble here in the recording studio with my intro and outro sound effects, so no music here, folks, but let's get right back into it. At the end of part one of this episode, I was talking about a major conflict that the Spectre experienced through the first half of the Doug Moench run was the cult of the Blood Red Moon. And it would all come to a head in issue number 15 of the run. But first, I need to talk about a couple of interesting relationships that started up during the first few issues of the Spectre run, and then were really picked up on past issue number 9. Perhaps not surprisingly, Jim Corrigan started a romantic relationship with Kim Liang. And even though Corrigan came across as a rather randy fellow, something of a chauvinist, Kim fell for him and saw something really likable, perhaps even lovable, in him. But what was really interesting was that the Spectre entered an emotional, romantic, physical, and even sexual relationship with Madame Xanadu. And that had a lot of fans really surprised, myself included, given that the Spectre on his own is a ghost, and one might ask whether a ghost would even be capable of engaging in a physical and a sexual relationship with another being, whether they be alive or dead themselves. And certainly, one could argue that during the early Golden Age as well as the Bronze Age, the reason why Jim Corrigan feigned disinterest in Clarice Winston and then Gwen Sterling was because at those points in time he didn't really have a physical body. He appeared to be a human male, but he didn't really have a true physical being, and so perhaps he wasn't capable of performing certain male physical functions. And so it wasn't just a matter of him covering up his secret identity. It was just that he knew that he couldn't really partake in a full physical relationship. And if one's saying, well, what about the Silver Age when he was pursuing Mona? Well, at that point in the Silver Age, it was established that Corrigan's body had been fully reanimated, and so he was capable of having a physical relationship. But here, it was quite interesting to see this spirit of wrath entering a relationship and expressing his love for another person. And there was a pretty big outcry over issue number 9 of the Spectre. This was where Gray Morrow came on board, and retailers were shocked, despite the fact that this volume of the Spectre was presented as a new format title and was geared towards more mature readers. Retailers and readers were shocked to open issue number 9 and see Madame Xanadu lying naked in a number of positions on her couch, wearing nothing but some jewelry. And there was an attempt to cover up the nudity by coloring the entire scenes and pages in different shades of green. But thanks to things like Photoshop, there are any number of scans out there now of the first couple of pages of Spectre number 9 where people have recolored the art, added certain other elements, and it's full on nudity. And the reason why retailers were perturbed was because they had no way of giving the readers advance warning that, hey, if you're sensitive to nudity in comics, or if you think that a younger reader might pick up this book, think twice about buying this issue. There's nothing there, but quite interesting. And Jim Corrigan and the Spectre certainly had a very difficult relationship at this time. Jim Corrigan comes across as a man of the present day. In contrast to John Ostrander Mandrake run, Corrigan here is a man of the 80s. If you were a newcomer to DC and you weren't familiar with the Spectre's history, you would say that Jim Corrigan was someone who was born only 30-some years ago, had only been recently brought back from the dead. And we don't get any of that hard-edged, hard-boiled detective in Doug Moench's interpretation of Jim Corrigan here. And so throughout the first 15 issues of the Spectre run, Corrigan often rails against the Spectre and says to the Spectre, you're going too far. You're torturing people. This is immoral, the way that you are treating them. Yes, they're bad guys. Yes, they deserve to be punished, but they need to be punished according to the letter of the law. Of course, the Spectre has no use for any of what he sees as a useless rant by Corrigan. And it's during this time that the Spectre is in this amorous relationship with Madame Xanadu that the Spectre does try to reach out to Corrigan and to say, I understand that you don't like what I'm doing, but this is in my nature. This is something which I have to do. So we're going to have to agree to disagree on our methods, but in the end, we need to agree that we're both seeking the same thing, justice. And so it really comes to a head in issue number 15, where Kim and Xanadu have both been captured by the cult of the Blood Red Moon, and in order to save them, Spectre has to enter the world of Madame Xanadu's tarot cards, and he knows that there's a risk to him on this plane of existence. Normal laws which govern our physical plane of reality don't apply here, and so he knows that he's quite vulnerable, and he's prepared to go in alone, but Corrigan says, no, you're not getting a break from me. For one, there's a 24-hour rule. Who knows how that works in the tarot card world? And two, they've got my girl too. So Corrigan, in a neat role reversal, jumps into the Spectre. And so both Corrigan and the Spectre get to see what it feels like from the opposite end. Of course, they're both able to rescue Xanadu and Kim. And it appears that at the end of issue 15, they've reached a sort of a common ground where now maybe you'll see them not quite so chummy as in the Silver Age, but there's not going to be that same level of antagonism or conflict between Corrigan and the Spectre. It's more like, a hope was there that mind, body, and soul would be working together in tandem. And at this point, this is where Doug Moench takes the book in an entirely new direction, while at the same time, or rather for the second time during this single run, going with the concept that everything old is new again. I just have to say at the outset, a lot of comics fans and historians argue that Volume 2 of The Spectre by Moench is really more like Volumes 2 and 3 by Moench, but they've just been collected together and the whole thing's been named Volume 2. It's because the nature of the Corrigan-Spectre relationship changes so drastically, and it's also because the tone of the book largely changes. There's more of a supernatural focus going forward, which I'll get into. Certainly elements of the Giffen, DeMatteis, Maguire, Bwahaha, Justice League. Certainly see influences of that in the second half of the run. Perhaps one of the reasons why this second volume didn't last so long, because there was such a shift midway through the series. So it all starts out with issue number 16, and Jim Corrigan is friends with Detective Pete Quarrel. And Corrigan has opened up to Quarrel and said, look, I'm the host of the Spectre. And Quarrel says, oh, okay, that's kind of neat. You got a secret weapon there. Huh. It turns out that Quarrel is investigating a drug racket that's going on. And at first he doesn't realize how big it is. He recruits Corrigan's help to take down a couple of dealers in an apartment. But he soon realizes that it's something much bigger and involves corrupt police officers. And so Quarrel says to Corrigan, okay, I know you put your neck out on the line going with me on this apartment raid here. You know, you don't have your badge, you're a PI, but, you know, I need you, and I need you to come to me now to this warehouse where we're going to take down this larger drug operation. And Corrigan agrees, but he's not really going along with Quarrel's idea that Corrigan unleashed the power of the Spectre. In fact, on the ride over to the warehouse, Corrigan practically pleads with Quarrel to reconsider. Corrigan says, Quarrel, you don't know the Spectre like I do. Once he's unleashed, I can't stop him. He'll do whatever he wants. What he does is horrific. He tortures people. Yes, they're bad guys, but he does unspeakable things. And I can't stop it, and you can't stop it, so we shouldn't do this. And Quarrel says, no, it'll be okay. And they go in, guns a-blazing, the two of them, to take down the corrupt cops and their associates. And Corrigan doesn't even have to call on the Spectre. The Spectre just pops out of Corrigan and goes about making a bloodbath of the scene. In fact, there's one extended scene where the Spectre takes two of the drug dealers, one on each arm, and he starts whipping his arms round and round like helicopter blades, just disorienting the two, creating this massive rush of blood to the head. You know they're not going to survive being whipped around at such velocity. And Corrigan says, I warned Quarrel. There's nothing I can do about it. So both Corrigan and Quarrel get out. And Quarrel is just in shock. And he starts saying to Corrigan, damn you, how could you have done this? And Corrigan says, you told me that you wanted this. So the two men get into a fist fight, and Corrigan ends up decking Quarrel. Well, at the same time, squad car comes by. Two cops get out. The younger partner pulls out his gun, sees Corrigan standing over Quarrel, is frightened, jumps to conclusions, and he shoots Corrigan between the eyes. And at the end of the issue, Corrigan's dead. And so in the next issue, we see Quarrel and Kim at the hospital. They know Corrigan's dead, but they want to make sure that the coroner doesn't get to autopsy Jim's body, because then there's no hope. Quarrel and Kim are hoping that the Spectre will arrive and that he'll be able to somehow revive Corrigan. But all the Spectre can do is try to pick up Corrigan's body and drag it along the hallway. And people don't see the Spectre, they just see Corrigan's lifeless body being dragged along the floor and start freaking out. And this goes to the idea that when the Spectre isn't bound to a host, he can't really interact with people on our plane of reality. So he goes to the one person who he knows can still see him, Madame Xanadu. And she says, well, you're going to have to undergo a severe change, and I think you know what that means. And Spectre says, yes, I do. And so On his way back, Spectre does stop by the hospital and he manages to reanimate